And then we have this, which has sparked a lot of discussion on the internet. And I have like no idea what really is going on here, but this is Genesys points list June 1st, 2026 onwards, OCG question mark. So this seems to be only listed for the main OCG format and available only via Neuron as the time of this writing. So what's going on is a good question. We will keep folks updated as more information becomes available. So it seems like from what I've gathered, this is a list of, we're not gonna go over this list one by one because this is over 300 changes to the Genesys point list. We've talked about this a couple of weeks ago or months at this point, that they made an announcement that Genesys was gonna make its way into the OCG. And there was a lot of questions attached to that already. And this, I think, is something that we're simply going to have to wait and see, because typically, here's the thing, TCG Genesys has been having pretty good communication. So I'm sure, and I'm not actually being sarcastic here, but I do think that once they see how much confusion is in the community right now about this change, they will make a blog post about this probably. Like they will probably say like, hey, this is, you know, this is the deal with this. This only applies to the OCG. We're not going to get this, or we are also going to get this, whatever. Essentially, from what I'm gathering here, this is pretty aggressively increasing the points on non-engine in general. Like everything, hey, Dimensional Fissure getting points at least. But essentially, it's just aggressively pointing every single bit of non-engine. Like, I don't even know what this card is. Sky Palace Gangaree Die? I've never... That card sounds made up to me. They're pointing everything. You think of a card, it probably has points on here. And then not just non-engine, but also a bunch of deck cores. Like literally every single Exo Sister is gaining some points here. So in a vacuum, in theory, I think this is like just essentially making Genesys a format that is even lower power level than what it already was. If you're playing with 100 points, it's basically impossible to build anything that resembles a modern Yu-Gi-Oh deck in Genesys format with these points. It's essentially gonna make Genesys like really, really aggressively lower power level with an incredibly large point list, right? Like the point list explodes in size with this. Like I don't know how many cards were on the Genesys point list, but this probably like doubles it or something, because there's a lot of cards going from 0 to some amount of points, which in theory could still make for a fun format, I suppose. But it does spark a lot of confusion about like Genesys format in the TCG, because honestly, here's my take on Genesys in terms of like low power and everything. I've already liked the point that Genesys is at in the TCG. I was really looking forward to playing Genesys format in the way that it currently is. I think the Genesys point system is really awesome. However, you have to make sure to not overdo it to the point where like it becomes so restrictive and also so like overwhelming that like you can't even make a functioning deck anymore, which I feel like is happening here. Like, because let's just use Exo Sister as an example here. You can't even play an Exo Sister deck without you don't have non-engine. Straight up, if you play an Exo Sister, like this adds up so quickly. Every single Exo Sister card has 5 points minimum, except Armament, that's crazy. That card is literally, I think, isn't this card like unplayable? Like if you're playing 100, like one of each, you can't even play. Skrelp is saying like if you play one of each, you have over 100, which is crazy, right? And at that point, I feel like you're making it so oppressive and so restrictive that you can't even build proper decks anymore, which is a little weird. The format that results from this could still be good. I mean, of course, I haven't tried it at all because this just came out, so I don't know. And I kind of am hoping that this is not getting introduced into the TCG Genesys. I probably wouldn't hate this format. I will say that. I probably still would enjoy some of this gameplay because it's essentially just lower power, like even lower power than current Genesis, which isn't the worst case scenario, right? But I still feel like it's kind of excessive. And the other thing is like, maybe this is just for the OCG. Maybe this is just for the OCG. And I feel like, here's the thing, my theory is they want Genesis in the OCG maybe to be a very, very harsh, like opposite of what modern Yu-Gi-Oh is. I think they want Genesis to maybe just be like this super slow, super low power level, maybe even feels like old school format, right? To give the people something who actually like played way back in the day, kind of like, you could argue, if you want to see this in a positive light, you could argue this has a higher chance of giving people the feeling that they did promise in the beginning with Genesis format, right? In the beginning, they said yesterday's gameplay with today's cards, right? And that arguably didn't really happen because Genesis, if I had to phrase it, Genesis is still today's gameplay, but more balanced, like at a lower power level. Like it is today's gameplay, but lower ceiling, which is, in my opinion, a good thing. I like that. So I wouldn't want TCG Genesis to change, but if they really want to fulfill the yesterday's gameplay, like, you know, promise, then this might be closer to that. This might be closer to that. If only there was a way to play Yu-Gi-Oh with yesterday's gameplay, some sort of traveling back in time. Yeah, it's weird, right? Because you can say like, yeah, if you want yesterday's gameplay, just play Time Wizard. I think, and this is a weird thing for them, I suppose, because like they're not selling you new cards for Time Wizard, right? Which puts them in a weird spot. So it's like they're trying to give you yesterday's gameplay, but with today's cards, which, like, you know, today's cards provide today's gameplay, unfortunately, right? That's just not how it works. Because you keep making modern Yu-Gi-Oh cards that have modern Yu-Gi-Oh effects, those cards are gonna play like modern Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So it's weird. It's a weird premise. It's a weird premise. So for me, the promise, and this is not an official promise that they've made, but the promise of you get today's gameplay in Genesis, but you get it with like less floodgates, less powerful end boards, less broken non-engine every deck. To me, that was attractive. The current Genesis format is genuinely attractive to me. I'm looking forward to participating in Genesis YCSs when they have day one on the Friday. And I think at the moment, Genesis is not experiencing that much hype at the moment. But I do think it is in the long run very attractive for people who enjoy modern Yu-Gi-Oh but would like it to be a little bit more balanced. Especially if people are gonna have more opportunities to play it. But yeah, I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see if this comes to the TCG as well. I'm sure they're gonna talk about it in an update on the blog later, in a couple of days maybe. I don't know. The communication on Genesis, you can say whatever you want about Genesis format, but the communication has been pretty top notch. So I'm sure we're gonna learn about what this means for us soon. Yeah. I mean, interesting. I'm kind of indifferent about this because I don't think, even with all these changes, I don't think it would kill my enjoyment of Genesis format entirely. It's just basically a different interpretation of the points list, like even more aggressive, even lower power, which I would have to play and see if maybe now it's too slow for me. Maybe I wouldn't like it anymore, or maybe it's fine. But I don't know. It does handle some modern archetypes pretty aggressively. Like you just cannot play Radiant Typhoon anymore, for example. It's just no longer possible, which is something that for some people, like I said earlier, that was something that people were disappointed by in Genesis format, right? Like people did start playing Genesis and they were like, hey, this deck that's good in the TCG is also good in Genesis, so why am I playing Genesis? So this feels like something that's trying to cater to that audience, right? It's trying to cater to the people who do not want to play against modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks, so they're pointing the modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks so aggressively that you basically have to play like decks from a few years ago. Otherwise, you just can't fit it all into 100 points. So I think some people are actually gonna like this, and I have to see for myself whether I like it or not. And then maybe it doesn't matter, because maybe we never get this in the TCG regions anyways, you know. People have been saying in chat that like this makes it less likely for Genesys to come to Master Duel. I'm not sure why that would be. I feel like Genesys being implemented in the OCG, if anything, made it more likely for Genesys to come to Master Duel. Because I feel like if the OCG doesn't have it, then it never comes to Master Duel, I don't think. And I mean, you can think about this whatever you want, but it does confirm that the OCG is putting some level of effort and interest into Genesys format, right? They're not just taking the rules from the TCG and telling people here, yeah, here, low effort, just play this format. They're actually making their own point adjustments to a lot of cards. You know, I don't know. It made more sense when Genesys, TCG, and OCG were the same format, but they never really were, right? Because the OCG's card pool was ahead. So it was always weird for OCG players because there were cards out there that didn't have points, but were still not legal. So it was kind of weird. Right? So, and it still is weird with those changes, to be fair. So I don't know. I think it's just the idea of having one Genesys format for everybody. It was never going to happen as long as TCG and OCG are on separate release schedules, which is at this point unlikely to ever change in Yu-Gi-Oh! So I feel like that was a hope that was never going to be fulfilled, right? Like that was just a dream that was never going to happen, I feel like. Like this is just something that you have to come to terms with, that like TCG and OCG Genesys format just have to be managed by different entities, right? Like it's just going to have to be OCG managing their Genesys format and TCG managing their Genesys format. Like that's always the solution, I think, because that's the same way with TCG and OCG, like advanced constructed. There's no way around that, I don't think. But yeah.